Very good evening. If only we could swap the forecast for the Ashes and the Opens round, because whilst there is some rain on the way, most of it will actually fall tonight in the London area. Tomorrow looking drier and sunnier. So there is that wetter weather to come tonight. The wind's easing down now across Scotland after quite a turbulent day, but the winds will pick up around the Irish Sea coast overnight. Rain heavy and persistent initially across Northern Ireland and then increasingly so central southern Scotland, Wales and some western parts of England. Some of the heaviest bursts come later in the night along some of these Irish Sea coasts with the strongest of the winds. Far north of Scotland, well, the rain will ease. Temperatures drop down into single figures for some here, but for many of you, it will be a mild night, 13 to 15 degrees. A cloudy, damp start, though, to Sunday. Outbreaks of rain in many areas. Rainfall amounts will vary quite widely, and most of that actually gets away by the end of the morning, certainly across England and Wales. That's a bit longer towards the east of Scotland, so it will be a damp start to the Open tomorrow. The winds are lighter here. Stronger, gusty winds, though, for northern England. But through the afternoon, other than one or two showers in Scotland, vast majority dry, some good sunny spells, and away from those strongest winds, it will feel pleasantly warm. Bye for now.
This week on Click, a virtual reality marathon. We're at the golf, we're underground and we're having a boogie, all while wearing goggles.
Click tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. on the BBC News Channel.
All bets are off as BBC One opens the traps on the booming world of bookies.
You know the upside to your losing? What? We win.
The stakes are high and the adrenaline higher.
I've just managed to lose 35,000 in a fortnight.
I'll either be ripping my ticket up or picking my money up, one of the two.
Britain at the Bookies starts Monday at 9 on BBC One.
You're watching BBC News with me, Sean Lay. The headlines at 8:30. The family of 79-year-old Don Locke, stabbed to death after a minor road accident in West Sussex, has paid tribute to him as the perfect role model and thanked all those who tried to help him.
Always supportive, the perfect role model and full of charm. Don, Dad, Grandad and great-granddad, the best.
The Sun newspaper dismisses criticism it exploited private footage of the Queen giving a Nazi salute when she was a child and says it's an important piece of social history. Rescue teams searching for 3 men and a woman missing after an explosion devastated a wood mill in Cheshire say it's looking more like a recovery rather than a rescue operation. The authorities in Saudi Arabia say they've arrested more than 400 suspected members of the group that calls itself Islamic State, foiling a number of planned attacks on mosques and a diplomatic mission. Well, those are the headlines here on BBC News. Peter Dobby will be back with the headlines at the top of the hour. For now, though, let's take a look at Talking Business.
Hello, I'm Michelle Fleury in New York. A decade ago, it was unthinkable. Now, America is in the middle of an energy renaissance. So who deserves the credit? Will it last? And what does it mean for the planet? That's all coming up on today's Talking Business. Welcome to the programme from New York, the capital of commerce and finance. Today we're talking about an industry that's been the darling of investment circles in recent years, the oil business. Over the past decade, American oil and natural gas production has shot up. Few, though, saw it coming. In fact, back in 2005, Lee Raymond, the boss at the time of America's largest oil company, ExxonMobil, said gas production had peaked in North America. So what's changed? Let's take a look.
Few would argue that oil has been a major driver of US foreign policy. Demand has outstripped domestic production. But times are a-changing. Today, for the first time in about 20 years, the US produces more oil than it imports. And it's all thanks to huge deposits of shale oil. That is, oil locked in rock. Traditionally, that's been too expensive to extract, but with improving technology, suddenly these deposits have become the new gold rush. The innovations in this field turning it into energy's equivalent of Silicon Valley, to the extent that some predict that by next year the US could become the world's top oil producer, surpassing even Saudi Arabia. The implications are staggering. This could make the US an energy powerhouse, threatening the dominance of traditional Middle East producers. But the world is a very different place to when America last was an oil-producing giant.
Despite the recent fall in the price of oil, America could soon become self-sufficient in energy. So today we're asking, what does that mean for the rest of the world? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Mark Schwartz from Pyra, which I believe is an energy consulting firm here in New York. You were also a chief economist at ExxonMobil before joining Pyra.
That's correct.
From the industry side, we have John O'Donnell. You are with GlassPoint, unusually a company that is building the largest solar factory in the world in an oil field in Oman. And on the industry side, on the policy side, I should say, we're joined by Richard Kaufman. You are appointed by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo as the state's first energy czar. You also spent time as a senior advisor to the US Energy Department. Now, Mark, if I could start with you. A couple of years ago, we were all talking about peak energy, about the fact that we thought the black stuff was about to run out. What changed between then and now, when we all seem to be talking about these huge deposits of hydrocarbons?
Well, I hate to sound too much like the economist I am, but a lot of it had to do with price. It was probably the case that the world was running out of $20 barrel oil, and for many years, up till about 2002, 2003, the price of oil had fluctuated around $20 a barrel. It became clear to those in industry and to those in the financial community that $20 wasn't going to get the job done anymore, that a higher price was going to be required to get the next generation of oil. And the price started to move up, and that allowed these wonderful technologies like horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, which are allowing us to produce the shale production, to become economically attractive.
I'm glad you talk about price because, of course, last summer you had, oil trading at around $100 or more a barrel. Now here we are, it's basically fallen by around half. Does the economics of shale still make sense?
It does. I don't think we're going to go back to the days where we were getting 1 million, 1.5 million barrels a day annual increases, but some portion of the shale resources remains economic even at these prices. The price has gone down, but the costs haven't stayed constant either. The costs have fallen, both because of continued productivity improvement and because as the industry has gotten softer, there's been the potential to put some squeeze on contractors and laborers to get the cost structure down. So both productivity and declining third-party costs have led to a reduction in the cost structure. So estimates range 20–30%, but certainly the costs have come down and offset at least a large portion of the price decline.
John, I want to bring you in here because, of course, you are helping oil companies in some ways who are engaged in extracting tight oil, shale oil from the ground, from rocks. You're helping them to, in some ways, reduce their costs. Explain what it is your firm does.
So GlassPoint is the only solar company in the world today that focuses exclusively on the needs of the oil industry. 2/3 of all the oil that's left in the ground is heavy oil, which, like tight oil, requires new technology to make it producible. And in the case of heavy oil, it requires very large amounts of energy. It takes a huge amount of energy to produce that energy. GlassPoint builds an innovative solar energy system that delivers the required energy directly from sunshine rather than by the combustion of natural gas. In places where in sunny locations where fuel is at a premium, because 60% of the cost of producing a barrel of heavy oil is the cost of the energy needed to produce the oil. GlassPoint offers energy at a lower price than fuels, and as a result, we've just announced our first commercial project in South Oman, where the first project that's producing only a fraction of the energy needed at that one oil field is the largest solar energy project in the world.
The US isn't the only country sitting on huge deposits of sort of shale hydrocarbons, whether it's oil or gas. But why do you think it has developed so much faster here than anywhere else?
the U.S. has some regulatory and other above ground advantages. You know, we've got well-defined property rights, we've got takeaway capacity, we've got a strong service industry. It's you know, economically attractive to develop small deposits. Many of these things, certainly China has shale resources, Russia likely has shale resources, but these above the ground factors make it a much more economically attractive environment to develop shale in the U.S. Eventually, it'll spread, but it's a logical place for this to start.
Does that mean that the shale revolution we're seeing here in America will peak perhaps sooner than in other parts of the world?
It could be. I mean, although we think the shale resource is quite large, we don't see it peaking, you know, any time within the next several decades. But at some point, it wouldn't be a surprise, maybe a decade down the road, if other parts of the world start to take over the growth leadership role from the U.S.
Gentlemen, we're just going to take a pause here for a moment. We've been talking about some of the geopolitical implication of America's shale revolution. Of course, this boom has also helped boost economic growth. Now, here in New York, the state sits atop the gas-rich Marcellus Shale formation. Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, recently decided to ban hydraulic fracking, determining that the environmental concerns outweighed the economic benefits. So what do New Yorkers, not a quiet bunch, think of the decision?
A lot of scare tactics have been used to control it. I don't see any evidence showing that it does these horrific things that are claimed.
The process of fracking isn't really it's not very environmentally friendly.
I look at it this way: cheap gas fracking, is there going to be an earthquake in my area because of the fracking?
I'm a proponent of fracking at this point. I think it could help the economy, create more jobs. It would be a boost in New York City. Obviously tax revenue too.
Fracking is destroying the environment, really is.
But it's cheap fuel.
I don't care. There's better ways. There's better ways. We have to discover better ways. Not everything is price.
Some voices from the streets of New York. Now, this seems like the right moment to bring in Richard Kaufman. Just to be clear, he wasn't involved in the decision to ban fracking. In fact, he's been brought in to focus on renewable energy, which we'll be talking about later in the programme. But Richard, it would be strange not to ask you, while you have the rest of the country rushing towards shale exploration, why is New York passing on this gold rush?
The governor made the decision based upon recommendations from the Commissioner of Environmental Conservation and from the Commissioner of Health. And so in terms of environmental conservation, the areas where fracking would exist, the shale, when you exclude the parts of that area which lead to the watershed which serves Manhattan, the relevant area that would be available for fracking was not that large. And the health, in terms of the health commissioner's recommendation to the governor, was simply that there were inadequate longitudinal studies that proved that fracking was safe.
Is the shale revolution making the U.S. stronger?
It undoubtedly is. I mean, it's rapidly turned us, as you mentioned up front, into an evolving energy exporter, both for natural gas. It's going to be a while longer for oil, and we may import crude oil for quite some time, but we're exporting ever growing amounts of products to the rest of the world. Refineries that we thought were going to have to shut down are now operating profitably and exporting into South America, Africa, the rest of the world. We are seeing, slated to have a lot of major petrochemical plants open up over the next 5 years in particular, based on the availability of cheap gas and cheap natural gas liquids for feed. So, and certainly from a balance of payment standpoint, you know, we're seeing a sharp decline in our oil import bill and far less dependence on oil from the Middle East. Now, the U.S. is still part of a global market. We're not disconnected. We're still going to be sensitive to developments that go on everywhere else. But yes, I mean, I think it's hard to say that this hasn't been a net benefit. And of course, there are environmental issues, which primarily have been addressed by the states so far.
Sorry to interrupt. Does this make the U.S.
or
the energy market more stable with the arrival of the U.S. as such a big player?
I think directionally it does, because you now have, traditionally a lot of the world's oil wasn't that responsive to price. Once you build a big offshore platform, that once it's up and running, it's going to continue running. You can't do much to increase or decrease the volume. But now, if we have a major run-up in price, we will see more rigs and more shale production. And as we're seeing right now, if you get a big decline in price, we're seeing a decline in shale production. So you've got another source of price-sensitive oil that the world really hasn't had for quite some time.
Clearly, gentlemen, a subject with lots more to explore, and we'll be looking at where alternative energy sources like wind and solar fit in. But first, this week's latest instalment of our look at the history of capitalism. Our comedy consultant, Colm O'Regan, takes a look at one of this country's founding fathers for his background on how America was built.
Now, as a sideways looking at life kind of comedian who tries to explain complex topics in a Comic Sans accessible sort of way, when I think of American capitalism, of course I think of Wall Street. And when I think of Wall Street, I think of that bull over there. And because I'm that kind of sideways looking comedian, I'm going to try and get a selfie with the bull. I've never felt like more of a celebrity. This guy here is holding back the entire crowd so I can take my selfie with the bull on Wall Street. Look at all those tourists gathered around this symbol of capitalism. I really can't believe they're all falling for this. Oh look, souvenirs. Brilliant. How much for your bull, sir?
This one is $25.
Would you take 20 for it in the spirit of business and haggling and capitalism?
No, I won't take 20 for it. I'll take 25 for it.
You'll take 25, you're not going to move at all. What can I get for 20?
20? You can just right here for 20.
You get that, a golden bull?
Golden bull.
So you're selling me some golden bull
Definitely.
for $20. Okay, that's a deal,
bull.
sir.
My man.
Thank you very much.
No doubt.
That's enough, bull. Let's find out from people who know about these things what American capitalism means to them.
Capitalism to me is a political and economic system, sort of an entire social formation that really prioritizes accumulation and proliferation of capital.
I think American capitalism is the irrepressible kind.
Well, it's certainly all about the incentivizing characteristics of private sector ownership and competitive markets.
It adapts and changes to shocks and crises and life in general.
We've had many different iterations of capitalism throughout the history of the United States, ranging from racialized chattel slavery all the way through the kind of financialized capitalism that we live with today.
It's rather like a glorious weed in an industrial park. They try to crop it down, beat it down, but it will simply not die. It keeps popping back up.
To understand capitalism in America, we need to go back in time to the founding fathers, specifically Alexander Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton was born outside the United States, makes his way here, becomes a crucial aide to George Washington during the Revolutionary War, and then when the United States is sort of formally erected, he becomes the first Secretary of the Treasury. Hamilton believes that the future of the United States is as a manufacturing, industrializing power, a view that would resonate for the rest of American history.
While I'm here, I might as well go and pay my respects to Alexander Hamilton. I like his style. Founding father of the United States, first Secretary of the Treasury, and a profound influence on American capitalism. But how would you really like to be remembered in New York City? With a musical, of course. Yes, it's Hamilton, the musical, playing here off Broadway. To be honest, I'm a little gutted. I thought I was doing something unique and different. It turns out these guys have written an entire musical. I'm really going to have to up my game.
Thanks to Colm O'Regan for that. Today on Talking Business, we've been discussing America's energy renaissance and what it means for the rest of the world. But what about the environment? Well, back with me to discuss this is Richard Kaufman from New York State, the energy czar. We've got John O'Donnell from the company GlassPoint, a solar company. And at this point, I also want to bring in Mark Brownstein. You are from the Environmental Defence Fund. Mark, if I could start with you, is fracking bad?
Well, I think when you look at fracking, you really have to think about three different issues.
The first is, what's the impact to the communities where the production is taking place? The second has to do with methane emissions. Natural gas is methane, and methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas pollutant, many times more powerful than carbon dioxide. So even small leaks and small venting of natural gas can be a big problem for the climate. There was a study here in the United States that suggested that in the US we could get a 40% reduction in methane emissions from the oil and gas industry for about a penny per 1,000 cubic feet of gas produced, and today gas is selling at about $3, right? So a fraction of the cost.
And that ties in with the goals President Obama has set for the oil and gas industry to reduce methane emissions by what, 40 to 45%?
40 to 45% over the next 10 years. And by the way, if we did that on a global basis, globally we're losing about 3% of the gas we produce every year. If gas loss globally was a country, it would be the 7th largest producer of natural gas in the world, right? So this is not just a US problem. The methane issue is a global gas issue. But a 40% reduction for a penny, right, means that there's a lot that we can do simply by doing a better job of finding and fixing leaks across the system, replacing older equipment with more efficient, newer equipment. All of these are technologies that are available to industry today. Some leaders in industry are doing this, but not enough are engaged, and that's why regulation becomes so important. We need everyone in the game. The third issue is, what impact does all this new natural gas have on our nation's energy choices? Does it crowd out renewables? Does it help us integrate renewables into the system? This is a big source of debate in the US.
Well, yes, I'm glad you bring that up, because people have been talking about the fact that oil prices have gone down, natural gas prices has gone down. Has that meant that consumers are sort of pushing off looking at alternative sources of energy? Richard, if I could bring you in here.
Well, I think that sometimes people think that, that the shale gas revolution has had a negative effect on renewables. And in general, I don't think that that's actually the right way to think about it. Because the interesting thing about all this shale gas is it's been substituting for coal in production of in production of electricity. And you're not going to build a coal power plant next to your house or your factory, but you certainly can use natural gas to produce heat and power at the distributed level. And it actually provides the ability, more distributed solutions actually provides the flexibility for integration of more renewable resources. So we need to build a power system that is the system that people have talked about for quite a long time, but we're not building it. An integrated network system that looks a lot like the IT system, where it has the benefits of the central station, like the mainframe in the IT world, but the flexibility and innovation of distributed solutions.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about, instead of one giant electricity grid, you're talking about lots of mini grids.
That interact with each other, that's a network. Because right now, we've been building a patchwork system, and it's very capital inefficient, and it's very energy inefficient. So when we talk about capital inefficiency, the power sector in New York, and it's not that different in other states, has average capacity utilization of 55%. And so it's built on this for the hottest couple of days of the year, but customers pay for that capital all year long.
Now, John, you've been sitting quietly there in the middle. You're the only one here on our panel who actually works for a solar company. What is your take on what you've been hearing?
Well, one of the things that's jumped out at me in this discussion is that we're really focused on how gas affects the electricity sector. But the economy is a lot bigger than that. You know, the IEA points out that in industry, 2/3 of primary energy is used in the form of heat, not electricity. Now today, a lot of that heat comes from combustion of natural gas, but a factory that's using natural gas is converting natural gas into high-value plastic or other products, and some of it into just low-grade steam to drive their process. GlassPoint builds systems that replace the use of natural gas as that source of the 2/3 of the energy. So we're focused on making it lower cost to avoid the use of gas and to release gas for other higher value purposes.
So if I could just add here, one of the things that John talked about was this use of the heat. And one of the challenges with our current power sector is that we produce power far away from population centers and transmit it over long distances. And not only are there line losses from that distribution, but a very substantial portion of the energy content goes up the chimney in the form of waste heat. And so if we're going to deal with the environmental problems, we need to capture more of that energy content. And the thing about distributed solutions using natural gas is you can use more of the heat for other purposes and also produce electricity.
Gentlemen, clearly it sounds like there's a lot more work to be done, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So if I could thank you all for taking part. Richard Kaufman, New York's Energy Czar, John O'Donnell from GlassPoint, and Mark Brownstein from the Environmental Defence Fund. That's all from Talking Business. We'll be back next week, but for now, goodbye.
Hello there. Certainly feels like summer's been put on hold across some parts of the country today. Some unusually windy conditions across Scotland in particular. At least here now the winds are easing a touch, but here and across the rest of the country tonight we're set to see things turn a good deal wetter. That rain's already with us in the form of showers southern Scotland and the northwest of England, but it's this slump of cloud pushing its way in which is set to produce more in the way of prolonged rain. Already with us across Ireland and will develop more widely into parts of central southern Scotland, Wales and then eventually western parts of England. Heaviest of the rain, gustiest of the winds later on will be on this weather front as it pushes through the Irish Sea towards the start of Sunday morning. Driest weather probably northern parts of Scotland down towards East Anglia and the southeast by night, but down across the southeast it's going to be another fairly muggy night compared with last night. Most though will see some rain at some point. Rainfall amounts will vary from one place to the next, but most of it's going to be an overnight feature or at least early morning feature because even by 9 o'clock most of the rain's cleared away from East Anglia and the southeast, just 1 or 2 showers left over. Good cloud breaks across the rest of southern England and into Wales. The odd shower can't be ruled out. Greater chance across the Midlands and northeast England, and across northern England some fairly gusty winds throughout the day. Western Scotland, though, the overnight rain starts to ease, just 1 or 2 showers, the odd shower close to the north coast of Northern Ireland, but for much of Northern Ireland it will be a dry and fine day. Wettest conditions though central and eastern parts of Scotland, and that includes for the golfers at St Andrews. The rain slowly easing. Most of it should be out of the way by lunchtime, brightening up, but crucially compared with today winds will be much lighter. So it's going to be a slow process to completely get rid of that rain. Always cool along these northern eastern parts of Scotland, 1 or 2 showers inland later, but across the rest of the UK a fine Sunday afternoon. Long sunny spells before that sunshine turns hazy from the southwest later. And okay, breeze will keep things feeling a bit cool across parts of northern England and Northern Ireland. But to the south of England, again, we could hit 25 degrees. So it's going to be another warm and sunny one at Lords for the Ashes, a place where I think some of you would want rain to fall. And there's a better chance of that into the final day on Monday if it lasts that long. This low pressure system getting close by. Weather fronts working their way northwards, bringing lots of cloud, particularly murky conditions across the south to begin with. Fairly humid as well if you get the cloud break and the sunshine come through. But a few showers here and there, 1 or 2 into Tuesday. A lot of dry and bright weather, but it will feel much breezy. More on the weather for the week ahead coming up in just under an hour's time. See you then.
Coming up next, World News Today takes a look at the latest global stories. Followed by this week's Our World at 9:30. And a detailed forecast in weather for the week ahead at 5 to 10.
This is BBC World News Today, broadcasting